Hi, y'all. It's Mamaw Yates. Today we're going to talk about something people struggle on with the edTPA. It's describing the personal, cultural, and community assets. Basically, what they're after with the edTPA is to move us away from a deficit model of thinking into one of asset thinking. So let's get started. So you're going to find this in Task 1. Prompt 2, knowledge of students to inform teaching. You'll see Part B, and most everybody's is very similar to this. There are some differences in the handbooks. This is the art one, but they're all get to this at some point. So they ask you to describe, considering your variety of learners, the personal, cultural, community assets as related to the central focus. Now that makes it a little bit harder, but basically it's what do you know about your students' everyday experiences, cultural, language backgrounds, practices, and interests. And then again, this comes up in Task 2 in Prompt 3, where now you need to find evidence of where you did link your students' learning, their new learning, with the personal, cultural, or community assets. So just to give you us all a little vocabulary that we're all familiar with, this is from the handbook from the edTPA. This is the art handbook, but all of them have the same definition. So this personal assets refers to specific background information that students bring to the learning environment. This is going to be their interests, their knowledge, their everyday experiences, family backgrounds, and so on. And we are looking at this as a way that we draw upon this to support learning. Cultural assets, those are your cultural backgrounds and practices that the students bring to the learning environment. They could be traditions, languages, dialects, their worldview, just anything from the student's culture. And then, of course, the community. And this refers to the common backgrounds and experiences the students bring from the community where they live. Resources, local landmarks, community events, and practices. So all of those are important, and they're all what we're considering. But when you're writing for the edTPA, you're thinking about your central focus. So it does get a little bit difficult sometimes. One of the things that I find my students do is that they fall into a pattern of deficit thinking. So you know the whole half empty, half full. Well, when we look at something, we have to look at it from half full, not half empty. And this is something that we find a lot in education. We have children and they have very varied backgrounds, but regularly you're involved in conversations with other teachers, and you hear them, lament about this poor child and their home life and their background, and almost as if there's just no hope for this child. And there's been a lot of talk about this, and clearly this is not in the children's best interest. And it's also really important that we stop making assumptions about children's lives. Just because they're different from how we are living does not mean that they're unhappy. And we also need to consider what assets that there are. So we can look at a family that's maybe struggling, but what assets does the student have? Do they personally have some resiliency? Is there some family support or community support for this child? Because what we see and what may be going on, we may not be seeing the whole picture. There's been a lot of research about this. I did find from this particular article a very interesting introduction that I liked. So it's common practice for people to focus their attention on what's broken and figure out how to fix it. But this is a deficit model, and businesses thrive on a deficit model. What better way to have a business model than to figure out what's broken and then try to fix it, right? Education's not that way. When schools focus solely on at-risk behaviors, they tend to work reactively. We're constantly reacting rather than being proactive. And so we have to get to a point where we're looking at student strengths in order to improve. Asset-based teaching seeks to unlock students' potential by focusing on their talents. This is known as strengths-based teaching. And this approach contrasts very much with the more commonly seen deficit-based style of teaching. I love this that I found created by Jackie Gersten, and this is an asset model of education. It approaches kids from marginalized populations, looking at their unique strengths, their passions, their interests. They have their own personal powers. They are competent and capable. They have a lot to offer. And it's important to understand that just because they are not following the beat of a traditional school education, that doesn't mean they're out of step. So we have to look at a model of education that really emphasizes the asset. And that's the basis of all of this that we see here in the edTPA is promoting this asset model of education. Notice they never ask you about the student's deficits. They only ask you to identify the assets. So that kind of makes it a little harder for us. We have to dig deeper. We have to find out about our students. We have to find out what is going on with them in their lives, their communities, their families. They got themselves, their family, their neighborhood, their community, all of that. What is positive? What kind of supports do they have? So avoid that deficit thinking. It won't work out for you well for the edTPA for sure. And it's just not what they're asking. You can do this. Have a great day.